welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of an absolutely fascinating book about one of my favorite television shows of all time, by one of my favorite creative geniuses of all time, David Lynch. I am so excited for this conversation because I can always talk about David Lynch and everything he's done. So welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yes, my name is Scott Meslow, and my book is called A Place Both Wonderful and Strange, The Extraordinary Untold History of Twin Peaks.
I'd love to know a little bit about your journey, both as a writer and a fan of Twin Peaks. When did you come to writing and when did you come to the show? And when did it occur to you to combine those interests?
Yeah, those are both long stories. I've been a professional writer since I've been worked in entertainment journalism for about 12 years now, doing a variety of things, mostly film and TV criticism at places including I write for GQ, I write for Vulture, and Twin Peaks. That starts even earlier. That starts in middle school for me. I'm what I call a second wave Twin Peaks fan, in that I was born in 1988, so I was a little too young to watch it live. There were not a lot of 2 to 3 year olds tuning in at that point. Um, but I came to the show at a time when it was still pretty hard to watch because the DVD wasn't out yet. And so I actually rented the pilot on VHS thinking it was like a horror movie, not realizing that there was a TV show. Very strange way to watch that show, especially because there is that tacked on European ending for all the Twin Peaks heads know about this. There's kind of an extra extraneous ending that was put on to make it more like a film. And I was just like, wow, what was that fascinating thing? So went online, discovered, oh, there's a whole TV show I didn't know about. So I had to secure a VHS box set from eBay in middle school to go down this journey. And that was where it started for me. And safe to say, I've never really come up for air since then.
I came to it at a pretty young age too. I was born in 83, and I came to it right as I was graduating college. So a little bit older, but still very impressionable, and at an age where it could sort of permanently rewire my brain, for the rest of my life, which I am grateful for.
That's the Twin Peaks experience.
Yes. So was the book pitched to you, or did you pitch the book? How did it come about?
Oh, this was like a passion project of passion projects. Like I was talking to my agent, we were kind of kicking around a couple different ideas for what my second book could be. And, he kind of did that kind of big picture, well, like, is there anything you've ever really wanted to, and I don't think he finished the sentence as far as like Twin Peaks. I want to do a Twin Peaks book. Like, I think this is a good time. It'd been a few years since Twin Peaks: The Return. And so my thoughts had kind of finally like settled about what that show had done. And so we talked about it more. It was clear that this was kind of a thing that I was not going to let go. I was a little bit of a dog with a bone. And fortunately I was not the only person who was interested in Twin Peaks, but yeah, this is like a dream project of dream projects for me.
Nice. Excellent. So talking about the show itself, finally, you mentioned early on in the book that it was a production defined by serendipity. And this is a huge question, but if you could boil it down sort of to its essence, what was it about the show that drove you to characterize it that way, both in its production and perhaps like in the themes and the images it presents?
Yeah, I mean, it's Twin Peaks is fascinating that way because of so much of it came directly out of the way David Lynch worked. And I try to include a lot of that information in the book. Probably the most famous story along those lines, he would call these happy accidents, is the creation of Bob, who turns out to be kind of the supernatural entity at the heart of everything, was just a total accident. That he was literally a set dresser working on the show. Accidentally, Lynch had kind of an inspiration, not even really knowing what he was going to do with it, but just was watching him in the Laura Palmer bedroom set and kind of went, why don't you just like crouch there and I'll take a shot of that? And then later that day, shooting a scene, Frank Silva, that who became the actor who played Bob, was caught in a mirror unintentionally on set. And those two things came together where suddenly Twin Peaks, this whole show had been conceived without them even really knowing who the killer was going to be, not really interested in providing that solution. And suddenly a big part of the mythology came together just sort of by happenstance and by inspiration. And that was, especially when Lynch directed the show, that was how a lot of the show came together in general. Ideas would occur to him, like, Mark Frost tells me a great story about, David Lynch just called him one night and said, "There's a giant in Cooper's hotel room." And Mark just at that point already understood the process and just said, "Okay, I believe you." And that became another iconic defining part of the show. And so much of it was not scripted out in the way you would think of a TV show being scripted out now. So much of it was on the fly moments of inspiration.
It's so interesting because we tend to think of Lynch as an auteur, somebody who had like a really strong vision and control over every moving element of any art project that he was involved in. But this was such a collaborative effort in so many ways. Like I was really fascinated to learn the degree to which he worked with the actors, and
Mhm.
sort of didn't always bow to what they wished, but would consider it and did a lot to sort of like work with their performances and their interests and their priorities. Um, Gosh, so could you talk a little bit maybe about some of these other collaborators, like Mark Frost, I think, who, doesn't really, I think that's being, sort of fixed lately, but doesn't get talked about as much as David Lynch does.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to acknowledge the show was co-created by David Lynch and Mark Frost. Certainly, I think, and David Lynch himself said, Mark Frost gets at least half the credit for what Twin Peaks was total. David Lynch himself said that, Mark probably deserved more of the credit. And I think their synthesis is really interesting, and it's a little tricky because I think sometimes it gets boiled down a little simplistically, where people have the idea David Lynch was kind of the auteur genius with the crazy surreal ideas, and Mark Frost was kind of the grounded TV guy who'd kind of come up as a TV writer and knew how to impose some TV structure on it. And there was some truth to that at times, but the lines were blurrier than you would think. Some of the more surreal, interesting ideas totally came from Mark, and some of the more traditional TV production stuff, Mark was gone for a decent chunk of season 2 filming a movie. And so, Harley Payton and Bob Engels, who were kind of the co-lieutenants of the show at that point, did a lot of the writing and running, but David Lynch was around too as, part of the TV production. I think if you look to me, those are the big four creatively on the original run of the show. You have to say, obviously, David Lynch and Mark Frost co-created it and deserve the majority of the credit, but Harley Payton and Bob Engels were very important and instrumental, especially in the second season when there were so many episodes just keeping the show going. And I think part of what happened to Twin Peaks was it was hard for all of those people creatively to keep a show running week to week, especially after they were sort of forced to resolve the murder before they wanted to.
Yeah, the ongoing clash between what the co-creators of the show wanted to do and what the network was sort of willing to allow them to risk, because what they were doing was so ahead of their time in terms of what was usually on TV, but it hit so hard. When I read that, at their peak, was it at the first episode or at their peak, 34 million
Yeah,
viewers? That is
Super Bowl
absolutely,
for
yeah, it's
pilot.
impossible in today's television environment besides Super Bowl, like that level of event. Yeah,
Yeah.
wild.
It's great. I mean, the buzz on it was because they were really smart about what they did with the pilot in general, because they filmed it around town, took it to film festivals, that kind of thing, for months before it aired. And so they really let kind of an organic buzz develop about, here's this crazy show, and who knows if it could ever be a TV series, but like, it's so amazing that David Lynch did TV. And you'd read about that in newspapers or in Entertainment Weekly for months. And it really did kind of create this groundswell of, okay, well, I've got to see what this thing is by the time it actually aired.
Mm. And you talk about its whole life beyond the initial first two seasons. You talk about Fire Walk with Me as well as The Return, which are both also things that I have loved so much. Let's see. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Let's see where I was
No, not at all.
going. So a lot of these co-collaborators that you've spoken of, the actors, a lot of people who have different hands in the show, you present their memories and their thoughts via their words. Did you do a lot of research for this, reading secondary sources? Did you interview folks for this? What was your sort of information gathering process like?
Yeah, it was a little bit of everything.
Mhm.
The first goal always was to talk to people. Many people were generous with their time. I talked to dozens of people who worked on the show. A lot of the directors, writers, actors. So that was always the first choice. There were great archival sources if I needed them, and I was able to dig up a lot of sort of half forgotten stuff, which was a lot of fun. It did kind of at times come down to like going through the LA Times archives, which is like keywords of David Lynch or Twin Peaks or whatever, and like on page 27, I'd find some little bubble item that led to a whole like, wow, I completely didn't know about that. And then I would ask Mark Frost, or, and that was a lot how the narrative came together. And then the last thing was just kind of going back to the primary text. I feel like in particular, I felt like I knew the original show so well, and I really kind of wanted to reset my brain to look at it with fresh eyes, because I watched it in middle school. I introduced a million friends to it over the years. It was just like, it was kind of, I had to kind of start fresh. So it was great to revisit the original show, to rewatch The Return, and Firewalk with Me. I took all of the in-universe books very seriously. One of the goals for this book was, there are a lot of great Twin Peaks books that exist, but nothing had been done since The Return that synthesized all of it under one cover and treated it all as one continuous story. And I think it really works that way. So, I read a very, earmarked copy of The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, or the autobiography of Dale Cooper, or Mark Frost wrote these great books that bookend The Return. All of that to me was kind of in the mix, and through primary interviews, archival, and all of those documents, I think I came together with a pretty coherent narrative of the show. But it was a mountain of things to work through, no question.
Oh, I bet. Did you find that returning to the texts themselves, the shows, the movies, the books, did your appreciation for them change or deepen over the course of the years and your research? Did all the things that you learned about sort of, what's under the hood when you look under it, change how you feel about it?
Yeah, I think all in good ways. It's great to, when I was writing the book, it felt like there's so many times that I just kind of sat back and was like, it's remarkable to work with a text this rich. Like, so many interesting things happened behind the scenes that I was able to get into, and so many things happened on screen that I was able to, it's more a book of behind the scenes than of criticism, but there's criticism in the book too, some analysis of what the show is doing. And to be able to say, I can turn this thing around and look at it from every angle, and every angle is interesting, and everyone who worked on it has fascinating memories and is willing to be candid about, what happened, or people were just so interesting to reflect. And I think the other thing that really changed the way the book came out in a way that I couldn't have expected, and for sad ways, obviously, is David Lynch passed in the middle of the writing of the book. And I never spoke to David Lynch. I knew when I sold the book he was not super interested in doing press at that point, and certainly he wasn't interested in. This is never a question I would have asked him, but what does the show mean? Like, that was the kind of stuff he just could not stand. And there was stuff I would have loved to talk to him about, and I was hopeful I would have gotten the chance to, but it was about 9 months into the writing of the book when he passed. But what that meant in practice was, even though I never got the chance to speak with him, the book is written, and the interviews and the book, about 50-50 before he passed and after. And I think that gave kind of an unexpected dimension that I couldn't have planned on. That, there were some people who really wanted to talk, and then they were really mourning him, and they were less interested in talking after he passed. And there were some people who weren't sure, and then they really did want to talk because they had memories and they wanted to make sure they got out. And so it's sort of interesting having the book straddle that line. And I think both sides of that show up if you're looking for it.
Absolutely. And, it wasn't not remarkable perhaps, but really touching how many of the actors in particular who were involved are really thoughtful and insightful and eloquent about their experiences, which, they do for the most part, like, remember the show very fondly, but it wasn't always like an easy experience,
Right.
just because of the both like the drama of production and the will they won't they of the funding, and will we get more seasons or not, but also the content of it. Like, the show is really hard on Laura,
Especially for the young actors.
yeah.
Yes, for Cheryl Lee in particular.
Yeah.
And all those people, to be clear about it, one thing that was universally true when I talked to actors on the show is everyone adored David Lynch. Like, he was an actor's director for sure. And so many of them credit him with having seen something unique in them, and, basically single-handedly given them the chance to show off what they could do. A lot of careers came out of him recognizing something special. And he had a really unique directing style where he would give these sort of almost like haiku, like very strange bits of direction, where he would tell Lara Flynn Boyle, can you, shoot this scene like you're a deer walking gently through the snow. Or Cheryl Lee has this great anecdote about how there's a scene at the Double R Diner, and right before David Lynch shot it, he was like, okay, it's the 1950s and you're having milkshakes and it's sunny outside. And the actual scene was like set when Twin Peaks is set, and it was not sunny and they were having coffee. But she was like, somehow that like made sense to me, and it changed how I played the scene. Like, he really had this kind of language with the actors. Almost every actor I talked to at some point told me some weird piece of direction that was super helpful for figuring out what they were doing.
Mm. Yeah, for all of the, the on-screen nightmares that he depicts, he really did care about the people he worked with, and he took good care of them and cared
Yeah.
deeply about the work. It was really touching. I mean, when first off, like, when you see the actors talk about him and quote him, like they all do amazing, impressions of him because he had
Yes.
such a such
I
a
should do a supercut of all of my interviews when someone goes into his voice, because everyone I interviewed would like do their David Lynch at some point.
It's so easy yet so hard at the same time. Like he just had such a great cadence, great tone,
Yeah.
just wonderful. Um, but it's very clear that they all really cared about him too, and that's why they were willing to go the places that they did in their performances because he made a safe place for them to do so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I remember talking when I was talking with Moira Kelly about shooting maybe the most, I don't know, how can you say the most punishing scene in Twin Peaks, but it's certainly up there. The pink room scene in Firewalk with Me, which is just endless. It's just this horrible, like this great droning song by Angelo Badalamenti, but it becomes very thudding and, it's gross, and it's these creepy men praying all over them. And Moira Kelly had such memories of how carefully that was shot, and it captures what it's supposed to on screen, but how much forethought had been done clearly to make sure that those actresses were comfortable when they had to go to that place, even though it was a long and difficult shoot that day.
Mm.
And so I think, and he would push people to go to those places because that's what the content required. But no one ever said that they thought he pushed too far. He clearly was doing it out of a real place of love and respect. Yeah.
When you hear Cheryl Lee scream in Fire Walk with Me, like that it cost her something, to do that because it is so visceral and so honest. Like it is just he really helps people get at the truth with his process too, even though everything he does is so abstract and like anti-narrative at points, even, especially in The Return. He accesses like deep emotional truths, I feel like, in his work and when he works with actors.
Agreed. I mean, I think I'm not saying anything new at this point because fortunately Firewalk with Me has been successfully critically reevaluated. It was not especially well liked when it was released, but I mean, her performance just astonishing. Like one of the great performances of that, I don't know, decade, century. Like how do you even what she has to do and what she's able to do on screen, kind of anchoring that horrible last week of Laura Palmer's life. I can't imagine going to the places that she goes. She really it's really, I mean, it's one of the great screen performances that I think I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, so brutal, but then at the same time, like I can barely think about like her smile at the end credits, like without crying. Like it's
Yeah.
just so like she just goes everywhere. It's really, really incredible. And with the return, like reading about the return and what went into the production, because that was so hidden right up until it
Mhm.
was announced, really brought back to me the experience of watching that in real time. It also aired at a time when like, Facebook wasn't totally evil and garbage yet. So like I was in Twin Peaks like Facebook groups that were talking about the shows in such interesting ways. And it was just such a great experience to be able to return to it after all that time. Very cathartic, like for audiences and I imagine for everybody involved in the show.
Yeah. I think that's true. I will never forget like watching the show that summer. Like, because I was a critic, so I was reviewing it basically as much as I could convince my editor that we should be writing about it. So like after the famous episode 8 aired, I was like, you have to let me do a deep dive on this. And me and a fellow critic did kind of a talk back where it was just, but it was to tune in on Sunday night and just be like, I truly have no idea what it's going to do this week. To know that like David Lynch and Mark Frost, who, because they co-wrote every episode, they were so far ahead of me. And I dreamed of a Twin Peaks reboot for so many years. And I actually went to the premiere in LA, which is the only time they screened it before it aired. And I'll never forget. So they screened the first 2 episodes. And the first time it cuts to New York and you get this glittering skyline where I was just like, oh my God, like I have no idea what this is going to be now. Like this is not the Twin Peaks, it's not a reboot, but a continuation that I ever would have expected. And like this could be whatever I thought it was going to be. They are 10 steps ahead of me.
Yeah, it was really, I think in some ways, even though I had seen so much of his work by that point, like I feel like it taught me how to watch David Lynch, like just if only to the level of like, don't try to impose your own meaning on this, just let it wash over you.
Right.
And then just like survey your feelings at the end, like
Yeah.
it teaches you how to like it feels like his thesis in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's fair to say that it's like the most creative freedom he ever had and the most I guess, like financial support he's ever had, but it just feels like such a pure distillation of everything he was trying to do as an artist.
Yeah, no, I think it's remarkable. You have to say, he got 18 hours of television. Literally, with that one show, we essentially doubled our filmed David Lynch output. Like, what a gift! Like, unbelievable. And he'd been able to do things on film, obviously, and not to take away from any of those things, but just to say, and with a lot of, as you know from the book, there was some wrangling with Showtime before they got there. But once Showtime came to understand that, like, here's the budget, it's not going to change, but within that, you figure out how many episodes it is, you do what you want. That worked. That it's, that is pure art in a way that, like, TV almost never produces. And what a gift that we got, especially not knowing, of course, that it would be his last project. I agree with you that it does feel a little bit like a summation. So many of his favorite actors from across his career, he found roles for in it. And so many of his themes, he just got to expand upon because of the length of time that the show ran. So I think The Return is just, I loved Twin Peaks before it, but after, that was when it flipped the switch from, like, this is my favorite show to, like, this is, to do that 25 years later and to have it all fit the way it does, that you just can't imagine, how it came together like that. Even now, having exhaustively researched and written about it and talked to a lot of people, it still just sort of seems like a miracle that it ended up on TV once, let alone twice.
Yeah. In 2005, if you asked me how I felt about the show, I would have said, like, oh, it's like a little quirky cult favorite that, like, me and a couple other people like. It's really weird, but I like it. And now it's like, it's one of the most important pieces of art of all time.
Yeah, right. It's great because I think everyone's coming around to that. There's so many screenings of it going on across the country this year in movie theaters. It's so cool. Since David Lynch passed, there's been kind of this movement of, like, people want to be in theaters. They want to have this communal experience. And, he always thought of it as a film. Like, why not put it in a movie theater? I've seen some episodes in theaters, and it's astonishing. It's a great experience. So it's really cool to see people kind of recognizing it for what it is.
Absolutely. Wow, that's amazing. Well, it's been so great to talk about David Lynch and his legacy in Twin Peaks with you. What is next for you as a writer? Do you have more books on your horizon?
Yeah, nothing I can talk about in detail yet, but I'm working on some projects that I'm excited about. Otherwise, I still write pretty regularly about film and television for GQ and Vulture and The Verge. I'm also sorry to say I'm based in Minneapolis, so I'm doing some reporting on the ground here. And so it's, hopefully that story is done by the time this podcast airs. But if you want to read about kind of the experience of Minneapolis right now, I'm doing a lot of that writing over at The Verge.
Cool. Yeah, I will drop those links if they're available in the show notes when this goes live. So yeah, thank you again. This has been really great, and happy writing, Godspeed, and we hope we get to cross paths in the future again.
Absolutely. Great talking to you, Jen. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, and listeners, please check out A Place Both Wonderful and Strange, The Extraordinary Untold History of Twin Peaks. Beautiful, beautiful book. Please check it out. All right, it is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time, everyone.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.